Hey, what's going on, guys? Realm Gaming here, back with another video. Today's episode, I want to do a quick review of Quasi's Mythic Plus is broken. Right now, it's gone really viral over the past few days. A whole bunch of people have watched it, and I feel that a lot of people are resonating with this video. Mythic Plus is in a very difficult spot at the moment. It's much more difficult than previous seasons from Dragonflight. I personally don't think it's as hard as Dragonflight Season 1, but maybe let me know in the comments what you guys think on that. I think Dragonflight Season 1 was a little bit harder than this, but it's still too hard. Dragonflight Season 1 was too hard. This season is too hard. So it's just kind of concerning the direction that Blizzard is taking Mythic Plus. At the moment, we've seen a whole bunch of changes from Season 4. So if Blizzard does fix anything in Mythic Plus, the time is now. They've done a ton of changes, over the past couple months with Mythic Plus, and if they're gonna fix anything, they need to do it now before this creeps into the season and we start losing a whole bunch of players. So that being said, get into the video.
So I think Blizzard is on the verge of doing something good for Mythic Plus, but they're not quite there yet, and they might risk losing a lot of players if nothing changes in the near future. I'm of course talking about the new affix system. So I noticed in week 2 in season 1, we timed all the 11s together on stream. Going into the third week, a lot of people are trying to get to the plus 12s. And I'm of course talking about the jump from 11 to 12, where we have the new affix Xalatav's Gull. This is where they give all the mobs 20%. A flat plus 20% health, 20% damage, on top of having Fortified and Tyrannical, and I totally get it. High keys is meant to be punishing.
Yeah, so that's probably a wall. Another wall is at the 7 range once you get the Challenger's Peril, that 15 seconds, the 15-second additional death timer, right? So it seems like it's sort of a consistent theme where everybody's sort of hitting their wall, and it seems like most people are hitting the same wall throughout these key levels.
It's meant to be challenging, but I think the plus 20% feels a bit weird right now. Scaling seems a bit off because you can be totally bossing a plus 11, absolutely smashing the plus 11 key, and then the moment you get to a plus 12, holy, we did a Siege 12, the final boss, a single tick of the dot is like 70% of someone's health bar. And So
he's talking about the dot on the final boss of Siege. The healer has to dispel it, and if you don't, that target will take a huge amount of damage over time. Typically, it's like 20%. So the fact that he's saying 70% is just insane.
Wonder whether the scaling needs to be a bit more lenient, because the last thing Blizzard wants is they had a great launch. The War Within, I think, was a successful launch. People love the expansion. Coming off Dragonflight, stuff like Hallowfall, we love the new zone. People are talking about the story is good again. And they have positive momentum, Blizzard. I know you have it. You know it too, you probably see it in the numbers. But I think this jump from 11 to 12 is turning a lot of people away from Mythic Plus and doing Mythic Plus week after week. Now, to be clear, I'm not speaking about sweaty people like me. I've played Mythic Plus for years now. There are good ties, bad tuning, and I'm still here, right? I'm always going to play Mythic Plus. But the problem is you don't want to cater to people like me. You want to cater to people who check out World of Warcraft every new expansion, every new season. And you risk alienating all these players right now. Why? Because right now, they get to plus 11, they feel good, and then on their weekly vaults, they get gear upgrades, and they thought, okay, now I can...
Well, okay, that's true. I feel like not many people are pushing 11s and 12s right now. I'm not even doing that, and I take this game more seriously than most people that play this game. I feel like I'm kind of like at the 8 to 10 range, so... But I'm not saying that there's not a wall there. There probably is a big wall that needs to be removed, but...
I can go and smash the plus 12s. I can try to do some challenging content. And then they're stuck in this endless loop of pugging 11 12s, 11 12s, 12, brick to 11. And there's only so much kind of to and fro they can go on before they say, eh.
I mean, it's crazy to think about. Like, the highest keys in the world right now are 14s. I think it's still 14s. So to think that a 14, and for specific healer specs, I think like certain specs have only done like a 12. So max vault reward is a 10. So to think that the highest keys in the world right now for certain healer specs are only 2 key levels above max vault reward, I mean, something going on there.
Maybe Mythic Plus isn't for me. I'll play some other game and check out Season 2 again. There, you lose your retention of players, and it's not good for the long run of the game. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the new affix restructure is good for the game overall in the long run. This is the first season
True.
Blizzard is testing something like that out, which is why I'm giving this feedback. I hope, similar to the feedback we have given on tuning, on the fixers, and Blizzard have listened, this video serves the same purpose. My suggestion is from 11 to 12, if you want to make it more difficult, you can, but you probably need to look at the plus 20% scaling right now. I totally get that we still have a lot of gear to go. Like right now, my main, which is my warrior, is...
I think there's a lot of other problems even below the 11 to 12. I do think we should probably fix it if there is a wall there, but the biggest issue to me is the reward system of Mythic Plus. So Gilded Crest only drop at a 9 or higher. I would say probably maybe 90% of the player base is not doing a 9 right now. And that's, to get Myth Track gear, you're having to do 9s and 10s, and the vast majority of the player base can't even do that type of content.
Is 620.
So I just think at the lower end of the spectrum, there's a lot of things that have to be fixed before this 11 to 12 range, but that's just my take.
There's still a lot of, item levels to be gained here in the coming weeks for vaults and myth track. I totally get that. And maybe the idea is that we get sufficient gear such that the plus 12s is no longer an issue. And that's a reasonable assumption. And with gear, definitely doable. But the problem is, will people stick around to get weeks of loot of myth track gear before you finally can do 12s? I'm not sure if a lot of people will stay for that because they get so frustrated with, I just get a 12 and it's a break, right? You do the first pull, you die, on the first boss you die, and then you go back to the 11. It's not very...
I mean, I would say most people in this game aren't worried about, again, this 11 to 12 range. People want max vault reward. Then I think after max vault reward, you kind of have like the key pushers, and Mythic Plus becomes a little bit more of an afterthought after max vault reward. But I do think that you want at least a 25%, a 25% of the player base to at least be able to get max vault reward. And I don't think we're there right now. I think only 2% of the player base at the moment has done all 10s or higher. And, that number is just simply too low.
Very fun gameplay loop. And I feel like you had a good launch. You need to act now. Tone down the plus 20%. If you want to punish the high key pushers, go ahead. You add new difficulty, plus 5% every interval or whatever. That's fine. But I feel like the gap to 11 to 12 needs to be addressed right now. The other thing I do notice when I play on my ults is the challenges peril kind of affix. I definitely noticed that in parks, a lot of people are kind of taking the challenges peril, which is basically minus 15 seconds from your dungeon timer whenever there's one death. They take it very seriously to the extent where the moment one wipe happens, everyone leaves because they have this impression.
So that's the difference between now and Season 1 Dragonflight. Season 1 Dragonflight, you would at least, be able to finish the key. I feel like groups now, they just disband instantly. And it's because the dungeons are just, I think they're harder now than they were Season 1 of Dragonflight. But that doesn't necessarily reflect in Raider IO score because you can still complete the dungeon and get 0 IO score if you just don't time it, right? So I feel like more dungeons were completed in Season 1 of Dragonflight. I feel like more keys are being bricked now in Season 1 of The War Within, even though the average Raider IO score was lower at the same point in the season in Dragonflight compared to now. Hopefully that makes sense.
That with a full wipe, that's, a minute gone.
And we can look at that,
very punishing,
that later too.
And it's impossible to recover. The truth is, in some dungeons, it's possible to recover. But I would say for a general park group, that 15 seconds might be a bit too punishing. So people are going from 6 to 7s, and they find it very jarring. And then, people are finally doing 8s and 9s, and they're so excited, like, okay.
And by the way, the reason I'm comparing Season 1 of Dragonflight to Season 1 of The War Within is because the way secondary stats work, secondary stats are always lower towards the start of an expansion, and they kind of work their way up as each season, progresses along. So that's why I'm doing a Season 1 comparison, between two different expansions.
Okay, now I can do a
probably
10,
not very
I can
straightforward.
Get a myth track in my vault, but then Fortified and Tyrannical collides together, and alongside Challenges Peril just makes it a very punishing environment for people to just park tents. Again, it's pointless to talk about sweaty people like me because Mythic Plus shouldn't be catered for people like me. It should be the general population. The more people who play Mythic Plus, the better the game is in the long run. Bigger player base, why not? But I would like to give props to Blizzard on the Xal'atath affixes though. Now, some of them is a bit janky, like, you know, the ones we have to soak the orbs. Some of the orbs go directly to the boss. Some of them spawn in the water. In Siege of Borealis, you can't soak them, but Blizzard fixed that pretty quickly. I think the rotation of the Xal'atath affixes, I like the idea. I like the idea that each season there's a rotation of different affixes that is themed after, let's say, the big bad of that seasonal patch. That's great. But I think they need to start looking at where the bottleneck of players are. Where do people stop doing keys? Where do people quit Mythic Plus? Where do they stop doing keys? And I guess right now for me, it's something like the plus 11 going to 12.
So this is a top end player, one of the highest, probably not like probably a world class player, but he's at the very high end, probably a title pusher, right? Stuck at the 11 to 12 range. I would say the average player that takes Mythic Plus somewhat seriously is probably in like the 7-ish range right now.
The 9s going into the 10, and the key levels where challenges Peril starts being this kind of environment, almost maybe a toxic environment where the moment a wipe happens, everyone leaves. Because I don't think that's very fun for the general population of World of Warcraft. And just to emphasize, this is not me calling for the game to be easier. I sign up, I put my hands up to be punished if I want to push high keys. One mistake, break the key. That's fine. But the main reason for this video is to air my concern. I think if nothing is changing, nothing is addressed at a plus 12 level, nothing is being looked at in terms of, let's say, the bottleneck at a 10 or the challenges Peril affix, where people seem to quit Mythic Plus after frustrations in dungeons and things breaking. I think if nothing changes, you could risk a very good expansion launch just...
Yeah, I mean, he's got a point there. Start high and work your way down, kind of like a domino effect, right? If they fix 12 and 11, then the changes that they make at that level should domino effect down to the lower tier dungeons. Kind of makes sense instead of working your way up.
Kind of fade away and having little interest in, you know, doing keys. Because right now, you might as well be doing delves. Everyone knows the trick. You run Zekvir's Lair, you run it multiple times a week, and you can get a hero track in your vault. It's considered a tier 8 delve if you do the first difficulty of Zekvir's Lair. And you might as well do that because you don't have to go through this thing where your keys break, people are toxic to you in parks. I feel like a healthy world is where you have delves and Mythic Plus both thriving. So Blizzard, you had a great launch of The War Within. Absolutely.
That is true. That is true. I'm happy with delves, but I do feel like Mythic Plus needs better, maybe not even Mythic Plus, maybe just at the heroic dungeon level needs to be better rewards to prepare you for Mythic Plus. There's this huge gap, and it happens at like 570 eye level. There's this huge gap between like 570 and 600. It's kind of hard to fill that gap in between. It's like there's no gear. It almost forces you to go do something else. Maybe Blizzard did that on purpose to get us to do delves and other world content, but I personally feel like heroic dungeons should prepare you with the gear to do Mythic 0 dungeons. And, you know, really good players, of course, can make that leap, no problem. But the average player, it's going to be hard for them to do content that is 30 eye level higher than, you know, the previous piece of content that they just did. So I do think that there needs to be some sort of gap that's filled in the 570 to 600 eye level range.
Really adore the expansion. Please take a look at this affix, especially 11 to 12. There's a lot of Reddit posts on this already. I'm going to link them in the description so you can...
Difficulties, killing Mythic Plus, difficulty. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I could definitely see a wall at the 9 to 10 range.
Take that internally, discuss, but I think something has to change here. I don't usually make this kind of video. I like...
And on top of that, I don't know why Challenger's Peril was ever a thing, really. It doesn't really make sense to me. I kind of get it. They don't want people to die. And they want people to be a little bit more passive in their dungeon pools. They don't want people like pulling like 4 or 5 packs at a time, wiping, resetting, and just trying to push their absolute limits every single pool. I kind of get that. But at the same time, I feel like that's what makes Mythic Plus fun, is being able to pool a whole bunch of mobs at once. And that's what separates the good groups from the bad groups. And dying already, I feel like is punishing enough. You know, you die, especially on like a tyrannical week. You die, you wasted lust. You have to walk back from the bot or walk back to the boss, rebuff. I mean, there's a minute or two just right there. So adding another minute through 5 people dying, you know, I just feels a little bit overkill.
Add-on, Mythic Plus, dungeon, you know, how-to tips. But this is just something I feel very strongly about because, man, you're doing so well with the expansion launch. All we ask, a bit more attention when it comes to, should we tweak some of the affixes? Should we make it less punishing? Where are players complaining about?
And we talked about this. If you go back and watch some of my older videos, we talked about this in beta, how difficult some of these dungeons are, how hard they are to heal. I was struggling in 10s with the best gear in the game at the time. So in beta, they give you this sort of dungeon gear that scales up to the max eye level. And like I could barely heal even a 10. So that was feedback that was given. And it wasn't just me. That was through, if you kind of kept up with the forums and whatnot, a lot of people gave this feedback already. So this is one of those, you know, typical Blizzard things where they're focused on the release rather than actually balancing the release. But yeah.
Keys and cater to those people. Not me, but those people. People who are quitting Mythic Plus, which for me is really sad to see because I've been playing Mythic Plus for years
and I've been seeing that in my comments. People are
I like
quitting.
to see this population succeed. So that's that. Yeah. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk. As per every YouTube video, shout out to all my Patreon subscribers, all the YouTube members that make this channel possible. Thanks for allowing me to do what I love to do in life, which is to make great videos for you. If you like the support.
So now, I'm kind of eating lunch here and doing a video. I want to take this in a very similar direction, but I want to scale it down to just the average player, right? So what could we do to fix this? So I think the first thing is the crest system. So the gilded crest need to come from at least, I would say, at least 8, maybe 7, but I would say at least 8. I think that's fair enough, right? So gilded crests need to come from 8. What else do we need to do? I think that they need to fix the gap between heroic and mythic 0. So heroic. I think that honestly, heroic dungeons just need to give better gear. So at the very, very low end of things, I think that there is a problem that needs to be addressed for new players. Going from a heroic dungeon to a mythic 0 dungeon is just insane right now. There's no reason it should be. We should have that big gap. Another thing is the Challenger's Peril. This just needs to be, in my opinion, removed completely from the game. I don't think it's adding anything. It just frustrates people even more. There's nothing cool and unique about it that adds any sort of value to a Mythic Plus environment. Then another thing I've been seeing a lot of complaints about is just the dungeon pool that was selected. Like Necrotic Wake is not a pug-friendly dungeon. You know, third boss is, you get to do it in a very specific way, in a very specific order. And I don't know if a new player is going to want to pick that up, right? They're going to have to be carried through those mechanics. If you don't do the mechanics, you literally can't kill the boss. The boss is immune, right? Another one is like final boss of Arakara Cydia Echoes. That's a tough one too for a new player where there's swirlies all over the place. You have to dodge. There's webs on the ground. There's these blobs that are chasing you. There's this disease, poison that's being shot off in different directions of your character that you have to dodge. You have to kill a blood worker to form a pool on the ground. Only one person can use that pool, so 2 people can't share a pool. There's just so many like little things and certain bosses that I feel like would really throw off a new player. And I don't know what they could do to combat that. I just feel like certain bosses might need to take a couple mechanics out. I'm all for mechanics, but not to where you can hardly play the game because there's so many mechanics. I'd rather there just be high damage from 3 or 4 mechanics, excuse me, than 6 or 7 mechanics with medium damage. It's just, at some point, there's just too much going on, especially coming from a healer's perspective. I've got a million other things I'm focused on, and I don't need 7 mechanics thrown my way It's not even easy for me. It's definitely not going to be easy for a new player. So I'll just put like dungeon pool / relax or chill out on mechanics. Then on top of that, I just think that there's a scaling issue, kind of like Quasi said, even at high end, but I think it kind of needs to be domino affected down to the lower end. I think that there just needs to be a flat percentage nerf on all the keys. I don't know what that would be. Maybe like, it feels like to me, they're probably at least 15 to 20% too difficult. And if you don't do that, okay, if you don't do that, then power needs to go back to the tanks. And then they need to revert a lot of these healer nerfs that they've made. So, you know, something's got to give here. Either they need to nerf the dungeons or they need to give power back to the players. I would probably rather see them, I'd rather see tanks go back to where they were. I think it was I feel like it was pretty fun to play, not having to focus too much on healing tanks. You know, you could just kind of focus on your group. Tanks could kind of self-sustain themselves, and we didn't have to worry about, you know, pumping a whole bunch of single target healing into somebody. So, you know, I don't know, but something's got to give with these three. I don't know, pick one or two, but something's got to happen here. We either got to get more player power or we got to nerf the dungeons a bit. But yeah, I think that if we could implement something like this, I think that would make Mythic Plus much more enjoyable than it currently is. So again, I'm very happy with the changes that they made in Mythic Plus. I love how they removed some of those affixes. I just feel that they did turn the dial up a little bit too high on some of these dungeons. And I think they probably did that on purpose. They didn't want to accidentally make content too easy and everybody had access to all these different rewards and they'd have to make some sort of emergency hotfix to, you know, buff everything up. So I kind of understand why they did it, but I think the time has come where they need to turn that dial back a little. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Shout out to my patrons here. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you guys for believing in the channel. If you guys enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. We'll see you on the next one.